Good evening, everyone. Today we have our monthly lecture. It will be about why suffer. First, I will do the initial reading, and then Andrea will do the initial prayer. Let us glorify to our God and Father be glory forever and ever. Paul 12:20. When the vase is taken out of the kiln, it says, Blessed be the heat that has made me hard. When the cloth is taken from the forge, it affirms, Blessed be the hammer that has shaped me. When the polished piece of wood glows in the palace, it exclaims, Blessed be the blade cutting thoroughly, preparing me. When silk shines in the temple, it says to itself, Blessed be the ugly silkworm that gave me life. When the flower opens, velvety and sublime, it sweetly gives thanks. Blessed be the dark soil that filled me with peace. When the sick person recovers his health, he cries out happily. Blessed be the pain that taught me the lesson of balance. Everything is beautiful, everything is great, everything is holy in God's house. Let us thank the storm that He knew, the struggle that perfects, and the suffering that enlightens. The dawn is the wonder of heaven that comes after the night. In all our difficulties and darkness, may your Father be glorified forever and ever. Now, I'm going to be doing the initial prayer, and then I'll pass to Alcione.
Let's elevate our thoughts. Let's calm our hearts. Close your eyes. Dear God, lovely Master Jesus, we would like to ask permission to start one more meeting of the Alcione Spiritist Group of New Zealand. We'd like to open our minds so we can connect with our good spirits, so we can receive inspiration and be open to all the learning that we're going to acquire here today. Let's bless the lecturer of today so she can pass all the knowledge and can reach our hearts. Stay with us, Master, always. So be it.
Good evening, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. It's a little bit strange because the cell phones are too close to me, so is it okay if I stay here? Or
Yeah.
okay, I don't want to block here, but I also want to see people, which is very good to see people in person here after all the lockdowns and the restrictions. It's so nice to see people in person. And thank you. Is okay, Andrea?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And thank you for those watching us on Facebook or Instagram. So everybody is welcome. And we chose this topic, why we suffer, and we did a little research on Spiritist books. So I need the. So I need this as well. And we basically use these books. The Spirit's book, Gospel According to Spiritism, which are the books that we use pretty much every week here when we do our studies, plus a very important book for the Spiritist research was Plenitude from Joanna de Angelis and Divaldo Franco, which is a fantastic book. So it talks a lot about suffering and explain what this is. So to start with, let's look at a definition. What is suffering? We talk a lot about this. I'm suffering because of this, because of that. there is suffering everywhere, but what is it? So just a quick definition is to experience physical or mental pain. The physical one we know very well, but the mental one, sometimes we don't think much about it. So mental pain is a state that includes our minds and also negative emotions, thoughts, and beliefs. So the mental pain is very complex. The mental suffering is very complex. So we're going to give some examples so we can understand it better. Some types of suffering. So the physical one has to do with diseases or sickness. And that has been very common. In the past couple of years, we were hearing a lot about diseases, right? Especially, as we all know, COVID-19. Almost every day on the news would be a report of how many cases, how many people died, whether in New Zealand or everywhere. So that was very present in our life. The physical pain, which is a kind of suffering. And of course, not only COVID-19, there are so many other diseases that humanity is going through at the moment. The psychological pain, or suffering, there are many more than what we put in there. But just to give us an idea, losses are something very present again in our life. It's really hard when we lose someone we love. It's really hard when someone passes away and we don't have that present every day in our life. So we suffer when that happens. It can be very hard as well when we have some financial or material losses. We suffer because of this too. Could be losing a job, could be a relationship breakup. So there are many other examples, but we're just going to give a few. And in terms of mental health, suffering can be really hard when people have depression, anxiety, or some kind of sadness. There is the clinical depression when people need to take medication, but there is also a mild or not so severe depression that many times we created by our negativity and by focus so much on our past mistakes, then our guilty can take us to depression. On the other hand, anxiety can be caused by our focus in the future and things that we don't know. We are so worried about what's going to happen tomorrow, next month, that we don't live in the present. We live either in anxiety in the future or depression in the past. But we're going to explain that a little bit better soon. In order to explain why we suffer, there are a few important questions that luckily Spiritism answer for us. So we can think about, but Spiritism has all these answers. And let's then check those philosophical questions. Who are we? Sometimes we live our lives, but we don't really know who we are. Where do we come from? And where are we going from here? So it's about us. We need to understand us first to understand suffering. Because after all, we suffer. We are the ones that are suffering. And in order to answer those questions, then we're going to use Gospel according to Spiritism, where the superior spirits bring us information about the progression of the worlds, the progression of the planets, and consequently is the progression of people or the spirits that are in the planets. Most of us have seen that before, so it could be a reminder, but we can explain one by one. So the first type of category of planets that we can see in Gospel according to Spiritism is the inferior or primitive worlds, where they receive the initial reincarnations of the human souls. Existence is all material, passions are predominant, and morality is almost new. As the morality almost doesn't exist, there is a predominance of evil. So this is the first type of world where the human incarnates. So as we saw the questions, where do we come from? So the first stop in our journey would be or was in the past in this type of planets, in this type of world. If we think about the history of Earth, Earth one day was a primitive world. was a place where survival was the main characteristic, where all the passions, all the vices, and ignorance was way bigger than what we have nowadays. So planet Earth at the moment fits in the second type in terms of progression of worlds, which is a trial and expiation, where evil predominates, more evil than good, is where the spirits have the opportunity of expiating the mistakes of past lives and improving themselves. Is a world of tests and atonements, not a place of happiness, and planet Earth fits in this category. So here we see it's still evil, it's still negativity, vices, but is already a little bit better than the primitive or inferior worlds. So we should be happy that we are not in the very last one. We are a little bit better, but it's still, we can see we're far away from the more evolved ones. But that means we made lots of mistakes in the primitive world. We still make mistakes, but we already evolved a little bit. So that's why planet Earth is in this type of category at the moment. But we are transitioning, and we always evolving, we always getting better. And the planets as well as the people. So planet Earth is going through transition and change, and we'll get to the regeneration type of world. Good is mixed with evil, one or the other predominating according to the degree of advancement of the majority of the inhabitants, where souls we still have to atone may absorb new strength by resting from the fatigue of fighting. So regeneration then is a bit more balanced. It's still negativity, it's still vices, but it's more and more good happening. It's more and more good predominating. And we are not there yet, but we are getting there. After that, the planet Earth, or hopefully the tendency will be to become then blessed world, where goodness awaits evils. So then it's way more good than negative. And the final one, celestial or divine worlds, inhabited by purified spirits where only goodness exists. So we can see a progression of the types of planets, and as the planets evolve, also the inhabitants evolve as well. Of course, will be some inhabitants that don't follow the progression, then they'll have to be transferred to another one. And so there's no guarantee that everybody will be transferred. So it just depends on how we deal with our own evolution and our own progression. So by looking at it, we can start to understand why there is so much suffering in the planet Earth. So it's still that evil, the word evil is not the best one, but it's still negativity or vices or inferiority predominates, and is a place of trial and expiations. It's a place where we are learning, where we're compensating the mistakes that we have done in the past or even in this life as well. So it's a school for us, it's an opportunity for us. But in this planet, it's still lots of suffering. So now we go back to those questions. Who are we? So we are spirits in evolution. At the moment, since we start in the primitive type of planets, we start evolving little by little. Sometimes we would be just the same, stationary, but we never go back. So Spiritism explained that very clear to us. We always evolving. Where do we come from? Our creator is God. God created all of us and created us in the same conditions, with all the potentialities of love, kindness, generosity, and so we have all the seeds in us. How we develop, or how fast or how slow we develop, is up to us. We are the ones that choose the pathways, and some people will develop faster and some will be slower. But where are we going from here? Our goal is perfection. So we have all these type of planets, all these types of worlds, and we start as simple and ignorant, not knowing much and making mistakes and learning here and there. And one day, all of us, no exception, we will get to perfection and we'll get to the last, to the celestial or divine worlds. We don't know when, we don't know how many reincarnations, how many years will be, probably lots for us to get there, but this is our destiny. And so now we can start understanding why there is so much suffering. The conditions of our planets and also our condition in terms of evolution. So Joanna de Angelis tells us, therefore, suffering on Earth is inevitable. That's it. There is no other way. Suffering is part of the evolutionary stage of the Earth and those that live here, aiming to higher planes. So it's inevitable. Whether we like or not, whether we feel that we should be in a better place, this is the place for us. And this is the place that we need at the moment. And suffering will and does come to us and many times come to those around us. And we can see that in our life. It's important to remember that many times we, apart from the suffering that naturally occurs to us, we create more suffering because of our moral imperfections, because of our jealousy. Many times we are unable to celebrate someone else's victory, someone else's success, because we wish we had that success many times. So our pride as well. We are many times too proud to forgive, to ask for forgiveness, and to recognize our imperfections, our mistakes that we all have. Impatience, who here is a patient person that can wait for things to happen? It's very hard, isn't it? We want things to happen quickly when we want them. And with technology so advanced, that becomes even harder because it's so instant. When we want to know something nowadays, we just can go Google and quickly find out the answer. But there are many things that we need to be patient and wait for the right time. Not everything that we want will come to us as fast as we wish. Lack of faith as well, trust. So we suffer a lot when we don't trust that some of our projects are going to work out, or we don't trust ourselves, our lives, and yeah, so there are many more imperfections that we have, because we saw we are in this planet of trial and expiations that we have so much to learn, and then we can create our suffering. Many times we can also intensify our suffering. It could be something simple, not even the moral ones, but even in material terms, if our vices, the material vices can also create lots of suffering. If someone, for instance, smokes cigarettes, of course you have some impacts on the body. If someone drinks lots of alcohol, also will have impacts. So everything that we do with our body, with our minds, can create some suffering, and that's our choice. And sometimes the suffering will be the consequence of our previous lives. So as a spiritist, we know this is not the only life that we have. We had lives before. We are the results of our previous activities. The effects, however, not always come immediately, but they will inevitably come. So even in this life, if we do something that harms someone or has some consequences, many times the consequences will not come straight away. They may come a little bit later. And sometimes there are difficulties or challenges in this life that is so hard for us to understand. We don't understand why we're suffering this specific problem. And many times the answer for it will be previous life, something that we did in previous life, and we are not aware at the moment. A good analogy that usually Monique, my brother, he uses in the meetings that we have is that our eternal life or our spiritual life would be a whole series of lots of episodes and of lots of seasons as well. And this current life is only one episode of a huge season of 20 something chapters. So we can only see the mistakes because we all make mistakes. We also get it right, but we do both. And if you can only see the present life, then we haven't seen the previous episodes. So we don't know what we did in the past and why we have this consequence now. Because the Spiritists also tell us about the law of cause and effect. Everything that we do will have a consequence. If we do something good, that will somehow come back to us. If we do something not so good, that will also come to us. And we don't know when. Could be in this life, could be in another life. So many things we're facing at the moment, and especially if they are very hard to explain, they might be consequences of previous lives. And maybe we're not going to know any time in this life, we're going to just know much later. So this is as well, Joanna gently explained to us that disease is the result of an energetic imbalance of our body caused by our emotional fragility. When we cultivate negative emotions such as irritability, hate, jealousy, we transfer this negative vibration to our nervous systems, blocking our health energy and creating an appropriate environment for the installation of virus in our organism. So in other words, Joanne is saying that we create our own diseases. That's very interesting, isn't it? How we are, our mind, our spirit, better saying, is so powerful in that sense. So negativity, things like irritability, jealousy, hate, and all the other vices, they impact our body. And depending on the intensity, depending on the frequency, that can create and does create disease. So it's a good alert for us. On the other hand, we can see many examples even in the Spiritist books that our mind or our spirit, if it has positivity, can cure, can create the opposite, can cure diseases. So in that sense, we also create this kind of suffering, which is the diseases in our body. So far, doesn't sound so good, right? So it's a little bit depressing to be talking about suffering, disease, and mental pain. Yeah, it's not very nice. But maybe there is a positive side to suffering. Maybe. I'm not going to promise, guys. Let's see what comes. But the question is, can we maybe, stop or minimize suffering? So if we can see in our lives, we can identify there is suffering in the life of our family, friends, and we can see everywhere. It's just turn on the TV or go to the internet. What can we do? Is there something that we can do? And then Joanna, our friend, comes again and she clarifies to us. In some cases, suffering in itself is the best therapy for human progress, while suffering tends to reflect more and make fewer mistakes, which helps them to reestablish their emotional balance. So she's saying here that suffering is good for us. At first can sound a little bit strange. How can suffering can be good? Because depending on how we suffer, we can learn and we can evolve and we can progress. And the other part I thought was very interesting. When we are suffering, we tend to be quieter and we tend to reflect more about our life, about the situation. We tend to try to understand why we are suffering. On the other hand, when we are just having good things and happy, we tend to not think much about ourselves. We don't want to know ourselves, we just want to celebrate and be happy. But when we are suffering, it's an opportunity for us to learn and to improve, and that's one of way of improving. There are other ones, but suffering is a very important one for us. So then, if suffering is good for us, should we look for suffering? Should we voluntarily try to suffer? Because then, if we suffer more, we're gonna go quickly or quicker, right? Should we do that or not? So Kardec had, of course, this question because he saw the value of suffering and progressing. But then, should we just look for it so we can progress quicker? So in the Spirit's book, Allan Kardec asks, if the suffering of this world elevates us through the manner in which we bear them, are we elevated by those which we voluntarily create for ourselves? If we just create suffering, are we going to go quicker? So this is the answer. The only sufferings that can elevate you are those which come from you naturally, because they are inflicted by God. So we can see there that we don't need to look for suffering. It will come to us. It does come to us. It's really hard to see someone that say, no, I never suffer, I never have any challenge, no difficulties, my life is all, it's very hard. I mean, I don't know anybody like that, so we don't need to look for suffering. Voluntarily suffering counts for nothing when they are not useful to others. However, when you suffer for others, you obey the law of charity. Such are the precepts of Christ. So that's a little bit different when we suffer or we sacrifice ourselves to help others, because then we'll be doing charity. So it's different if we're doing just for ourselves. So for example, if someone give up their food, if people are in a place and there's not enough food, and if someone give up the food to give to someone else, so someone else can be comforted by the food, this is charity. But if someone, there is lots of food, but they say, I'll give up food, so I will suffer and I'm going to progress. So that's not going to happen. So that's the difference, right? But yeah, it's very important to note that as a spiritist, we don't need to look for suffering or to suffer more. But if we see a situation where our sacrifice or our suffering is going to benefit someone else, then we'll be doing charity. That's the difference. Something important to highlight is our attitudes towards suffering, because we can progress with suffering, we can learn, but not always. Because if faced by difficulties and challenges, we complain, we get angry, we get upset, then we are not going to learn anything. And guess what? The same suffering will come again to us, because we are lesson not learned. The same when we go to school, and if we stay the whole year there at school, but we don't try our best, we don't do the tests, and we don't pass, we have to do again. So there is no value in the suffering when our attitude is very negative, when we just complain, when we're just unhappy, and when we don't do anything to make the suffering better. On the other hand, resignation is a very important word in the Spiritist books. Is when we understand the suffering, we should also, of course, do something to be better. So it's not just having the suffering and not doing anything. For instance, if someone has an illness or a disease, it's advisable to go to the doctor to check what can be done, to take some medication, and to make it better. Our body is led to us for us to use while we are here, and we need to look after it. So we need to try to make it better. We need to do our parts. But at the same time, we should not complain, because it's something that is benefiting us. It's something to making us progress. And the hard one that we should do is to be grateful for the suffering. Probably most of us are not there yet. It's very hard to suffer and be happy with a smile on our face and understanding that that's good for us. Gets a little bit easier when we fully understand that this life is temporary and the suffering is also temporary. There is no eternal suffering. It's something that comes and goes. And if we are aware that this is going to make us progress, is a lesson for us, then we'll be able to be grateful as well. So we've been talking a lot about suffering and difficulties, and the name of our planet, not the name, but the category is trial and expiation. And we can see many good things in our planet, right? The nature is so beautiful. We can see lots of solidarity. We can see people doing good things. And so at the same time, it's a planet of trial and expiation. But what part is good? What things that we can take or learn from our planet and value as good things that are in here, even though it's trial and expiation? Is there happiness here? Are there good things for us to enjoy? So Allan Kardec had the same question in the Spirit's book, and he asked the spirits, is it possible for men to enjoy perfect happiness upon the earth? And the answer is no, for corporeal life has been appointed to him either as a trial or an expiation, but it depends upon himself to lighten the evils of his lot and to render it as happy as life can be upon the earth. So the perfect happiness is not possible in this planet, but we can, depending on how we deal of our life, we can be happy here. We can have moments of happiness. So at the same time that we have moments of suffering, we can also have moments of happiness. And that's okay, and that's all right. Because sometimes as spiritists, we may think that, okay, we have to go through so much suffering, we have to evolve, but it's not wrong for us to enjoy the good things in our planet. It's not wrong for us to make ourselves happy and people around us as well. So it's possible happiness in this planet. Of course, not the perfect one, not all the time, but it's possible. A good example of it, that remind me of Divaldo Franco and Chico Xavier, which most of you might know. They are both worked a lot for spiritists. They work a lot to try to make people aware of spiritual life and the spirits, Allan Kardec books as well. And both of them had lots of suffering in their lives. So there are a few books and also movies about Chico Xavier and also Divaldo. And especially Divaldo Franco that we had the blessing of having here in New Zealand, in Auckland for a few lectures, a few times. And he was always happy. He had such a good sense of humor, even though he was working a lot, even though he had lots of responsibility. He was not serious all the time. He had jokes and everything. So I think are good examples for us to follow, that we should do our best, we should do our part, but it's okay to be happy. It's more than okay. And if we are able to be happy even when we suffer, that's even better, because that will show that we are aware and grateful when we are suffering. So how can we make it better? We understand suffering is good for us, we can improve, but can we balance maybe the suffering? And not only for us, but for those around us? And the answer is yes. The way to make suffering better is love. The answer is simply love. So love is synonymous with moral health, And love eliminates the poison roots that spread the production of suffering. So love can alleviate suffering. Love is subtle and sensitive, patient and constant. Even if the flow of love momentarily stops, it will always return. In the roots of all ennobling actions, there is the lifeblood of love, producing life and sustaining it. So even that in some points will be more suffering and no love at all, love always returns. Love is way more powerful than suffering. But we are still not so aware of the power of love. We will be, because as we mentioned, we have lots of imperfections and things to improve. But just to have in the back of our minds, a good, not solution, but a good component to have next to the suffering is love, because that will make it better. Suffering and love are both mechanisms of evolution. So we evolve not only through suffering, but through love as well. When one departs, the other one appears. Sometimes in the final cap in the fight, they appear simultaneously without the damage that normally would trigger. So they are both mechanisms of evolution. Most of the times we evolve through suffering because in our evolutionary stage it's easier for us. But many times we can evolve through love as well. And hopefully we can more and more use love for our evolution. As we know, love covers a multitude of things. Because sometimes we have an idea of if we made a mistake, if we did something wrong, to compensate that, that same thing should happen to us, exactly the same. We should suffer the same that we did to someone. But that's not true. Sometimes love may compensate that mistakes. That's why it says covered a multitude of things. So depends on how we deal with our life, depends on how much we love, and that's possible for us to compensate some of our faults, some of our mistakes, instead of just compensate through suffering. So again, love, it's a word, it's hard for us to grab what exactly love means. How we can add love to our life, to have less suffering in our life and other people's life. And then the best way to include love in our life is through charity, which we can see in many Spiritist book, charity is there. And so charity, then we go to the Spirit's book to check what Jesus understood by charity. What is the true meaning of the word charity as employed by Jesus? And the answer is very beautiful. Benevolence for everyone, indulgence for the imperfections of others, forgiveness of injuries. And just breaking it down a little bit, so the benevolence to everyone has to do with our actions when we do charity. And compassion is a key word, because when we have compassion through a situation, towards a situation or somebody that's suffering, that means we are not only feel sorry for someone that is suffering, we will do something to alleviate, we'll do something, we'll take action. So that is when we have that, we activate our benevolence. We have compassion and we try our best to solve their problem, to alleviate their suffering. The indulgence, we had even a lecture from not long ago about that. We need to be indulgent in our actions, but also in our thoughts. So the non-judgment, when we have thoughts already judging someone that is in a hard situation, then that's not charity. When we able to tolerate others' mistakes, when we able to understand, not only in the actions, but in our thoughts as well. And forgiveness, that's a very hard one, has to do with our feelings, and especially the one to forgive other people. we all make mistakes. We need other people to forgive us. And therefore, we need to forgive others as well. So all of this is charity. It's our actions, our thoughts of generosity, of kindness, and our forgiveness towards others as well. So love one another and do unto others what we wish they would do unto us. Every time we in doubt, sometimes we don't know what we should do. We always should check if we would like the other person to do that action towards us. If we would like someone having the thoughts about us. So if we follow the rule, we are going to always get it right. Yeah, so I think it's very interesting to see that suffering is part of this planet of trial and expiation, but also love is part of this planet of trial and expiation. And it's up to us to choose the pathway of suffering or the pathway of love and charity, and then we will progress because we all are going to get to perfection. So we go through all the stages and all the different planets, we all get there. But how far, how long, how fast, or how slow is really up to us. And just to give us some motivation, we're gonna play a music about Jesus, so our master, friend master. So the song is Mestre Amigo, which some of you might know. But we're gonna put the lyrics in English for those that don't understand Portuguese. So we're just gonna play, yeah, I think we're gonna put in English. And so we can reflect a little bit about Jesus Christ, which, because he is the best example for us to follow. In doubt, we can always look at his teachings and the things that he told us. And if we follow him, we'll be more able to follow the pathway of love and charity. So can you find music?
Yes.
So the song is in Portuguese, but you can see the meaning in English.
Quando eu penso em ti, Jesus, a barra fica mais leve. Sei que tu andas comigo por onde eu for. É tão bom ter-te por perto. Crer em ti me faz tão bem. Sem a tua companhia, eu não sou ninguém. Mestre, amigo, estrela, cintilante, guia nossos passos vacilantes. Dai-nos forças para vencermos nossos erros e nos guarda sempre em tua paz.
Think we can. Yeah, so this is what we prepared for today. Thank you for listening. And if there are any questions or any comments, now we open this space. No, no questions, no comments? Okay, sure.
Yeah.
That's all right, no problem. Cool. All right, thank you very much, guys.
So thank you, Alcione, for the lecture. I believe everyone learned a lot with you today, and we are ready for knowledge now. So now I invite you
Okay.
Let's go to the vibration.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So just put some music right here. So now we go to the last phase of our meeting with the vibration phase, and straight after we do the final prayer. Let's then unite our thoughts, our feelings, our willingness to help and share a little bit of our positive fluids and vibrations with those that need. To start with, let's visualize our beautiful planet Earth and embrace our school and our home for the moment with fluids of peace, harmony, understanding between nations, understanding between everyone. Let's also be grateful for the enduring planet that is helping us to improve ourselves and progress. Let's also vibrate to those that are facing physical suffering, diseases. Let's take again our comfort. Let's also take some faith in a better future and remind them that difficult times will pass. Let's vibrate to those in need on the streets, maybe without shelter or even food. But we can also have hope of better days and courage to keep going with action and resignation. Let's also vibrate to our brothers and sisters that passed away recently, that may be a little bit confused with the new phase of their lives. Let's take today our kindness. Let's then vibrate to our brothers and sisters that may be in a prison at the moment. Let's take and use the time to reflect, make new plans for a new life. Let's now think about those that are near us, our family members, our friends, regardless where they are at the moment. Let's embrace them with our love, our kindness, sending good vibration to them. Let's also now use the opportunity and think about someone that we know is going through difficulties at the moment. Let's send them courage, faith, and positivity so they can go through the difficulties and become even stronger after overcoming their problems. And then we can open ourselves to receive these positive fluids that are here with us, that we can fill up our cup. So when we go away from here, we can distribute everywhere we go to everyone around us. And then we try to ask the superior spirits to help us to remember and apply what we know already in our daily life. With our hearts full of gratitude and love, we want to say thank you very much for this meeting, for all the protection, for all the inspiration from the superior spirits, that we can meet again in the next meeting. I'd like to ask permission to finish that meeting, and that we can all can go home in peace tonight. Thank you. So much. Thank you everybody for watching us tonight, and see you guys again next week. Bye bye.